looking at the golf swings of the major champions of 2021. Let's get started here, Henry. I've got up our first major champion of the year, Hideki Matsuyama. And let's watch his golf swing at full speed real fast. So you can see a lot of the old pause is gone now. So he's pausing a lot less than he used to be. And I want to draw a couple lines in here, the ones I like to use. So we're not quite on the right line to be able to see if his rear end stays back, but close. We're almost on the down the line camera view here. I also like to put a line in. I'm going to change the color of that, make it yellow.
Can you imagine how hard he worked on getting that pause out of his swing?
It probably was tough.
He's probably had that his whole career.
As long as I've ever seen his golf swing, he has. So we got his belt line drawn in. So I like to look at, as a player's turning back, see if their waistline is turning on the plane of, and it turns mostly on plane, but he kind of drops down in his backswing. And then as he reaches the top of his backswing, you can see his club face is almost a fraction open. It's probably just about dead square. He kind of has a little bit of a weakish left hand. And his club's a little on the laid off side.
Gets a slight bow in that lead wrist.
Yeah, a slight bow, and then right in transition, it's hard to see, it blurs here, but you can see it bows ever so slightly more. Cool.
And what's interesting, as we kind of talked about too, is that the shallowing or laying down for him, it's not necessarily just derived from his core and rotation. It's also a little bit of manual sort of
his hands actually look like they might start it.
Yeah.
So his golf swing, it looks like right out of the top his hands are starting to kind of fire and get that club to lay down, and then his body just spins out, opens up real fast.
Yep.
And he's a little bit of a jumper with the driver. You can see his waist goes up a little bit.
He's got some strong legs.
He does, and he hits it pretty hard too.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you notice there is his rear end never moved closer.
Yeah.
Ever.
Now, one other thing to point out too is we've talked about before we even did these videos or these analysis, is that when you're looking at swings and analyzing these swings, keep in mind a lot of these camera angles are all different.
Yeah, so this one's not exactly it's not exactly perfect how we would set it up if we were analyzing somebody's golf swing.
No, it's definitely not a perfect down the line, and that's the thing, is like when you're looking at swings on PGA Tour, just keep that in mind, is that day to day their swings could look different just because of the camera angles.
Yeah, and their swings don't look that different day to day. You know,
yeah.
As you and I know, it's hard to make our swings look different.
Yeah.
But if we change the camera angle by 2 feet, they could look totally different.
Yeah.
So, but all in all, he follows. You can see that club shallows out. The club pitches back behind him, and his body opens up. And from a sequencing standpoint, his is a little different. It looks a little almost hands and arms early, but he hits all the checkpoints. When he gets to left arm parallel, his knees are right back square where they started. When he gets to shaft parallel, it's hard to get to stop there. There isn't a shaft parallel. It's a little above. But you can see the shaft and his chest are basically parallel at that point in time, which I like to see. So, Hideki's move is really, it's really pretty good. But it does require some interesting matchups because of his grip.
Yep. Well, let's go look at the forward on view then.
Cool. So let's switch over and look at his face on. Okay, so here we have an interesting view of Hideki. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. This is on hole 13 at Augusta. He's got a little ball above his feet.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, that ball's probably 3 or 4 inches higher. You can't really tell from this vantage point. But what you can really see is when we zoom in on his grip, we can see that his left hand, the back of his left hand is basically pointed straight toward the target.
Yeah.
So his grip's pretty weak in reality in the left hand. And then he has more or less a neutral right.
He got a very solid, stable, wide base with his legs.
For sure. And so let's kind of move him through the motion here. He makes a big wind-up. You can see the left bend at the top of his swing and the extension in his spine, which is really cool. And then you can really see as he changes directions, this vantage point gives you a really good idea of what his belt is doing. You can see how it lowers down that first little bit.
Yeah, he gets just that little bit of stretch right in here.
Yep, he gets that little stretch right there, and then it starts making his chest go. So he's able to separate just a little bit his upper and lower body. And then he starts around the corner.
Now he really stays in the shot. We've done a video on head movement and swivel, or some
his
guys
eyes stay really this way. He also doesn't deliver a lot of shaft lean. He's one of the guys that leans it less. He's actually got the grip of the club pointed more back at his middle. And what's Hideki's ball flight?
Pretty high.
Really high.
But, you know, for a course like Augusta or some of these firmer golf courses, that can come in handy.
Comes in, yeah, real handy. It's nice.
So,
and the shutter speed on this camera is not quite good enough to get the shaft. It blurs, but you can get the idea of what his body's doing. There's that. What we really like to see, and you can see his hands are still going up when that little change of direction happens, and that's a real athletic, dynamic motion right there that I really love. So, pretty unique golf swing, very functional, very cool.
I think he was like one of the top guys in scrambling that week, so we didn't cover short game, but you know, that takes that around that golf course too, but he's a phenomenal iron player. Really good iron player.
You can see the radius, how stable it is through the strike.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of folding up of the arms. His body keeps turning so he can keep his arms long for a long time.
Very cool.
It's a really cool golf swing.
All right, let's move on to Phil Mickelson.
And we'll zoom in a little bit on Phil and watch this swing in full speed.
Hitting bombs that week.
So Phil was bombing it. I think he led the field in driving distance at the PGA.
No.
I think he did. That's pretty cool for a guy who's almost 51.
He's swinging out of his shoes. I love it.
He's got that 48-inch driver that's now illegal.
This one looked more like one of his controlled swings, though.
Yeah, and it's probably did he have two drivers in the bag, or did he just have one that week?
I can't remember, actually.
Because that driver doesn't look 48 inches either.
Yeah, that might be one of his short. Because you can see even in his footwork, he's not coming out of it, whereas like when he was really going after it, he kind of moved out away from it.
He was jumping out of the way.
Yeah. Let's take a look at this action.
Let's move through it slow. So he's got a nice wide takeaway.
Yeah, the one thing I really I like in the takeaway I point out is that his club he kind of does like a little bit of a hover and moves a little off the ball, and the club gets pressured down just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
To keep the club out in front.
And as he's moving it away, he's got it nice and wide, which I really like. And then all that width goes away. But it's better than it used to be.
Yeah.
So he gets it up to the top. His left arm breaks down pretty good. You can see the club head peek out behind his right shoulder.
And his left wrist almost goes from flat to slightly cupped.
Slightly. Yeah, it goes from pretty darn flat right there to slightly cupped, and then in transition it cups a little more. And it gets pretty darn narrow, and you can see as he's coming down, the shaft is splitting at the point of his shoulder. So it's more narrow and steep than most really good players. And his footwork's a little different. His front side kind of pops out a little bit.
Yeah.
Or his back side, I should say. His trail side kind of pops out and makes him use his hands.
Well, and his face comes down more
really
open, not as maybe strong or square to the arc that we kind of talk about, but it's a little more open. But one thing he does beautifully, and probably the best of all time, is knowing how to use his hands, and he really keeps that trail wrist extension too.
He keeps it for a long time, and then he really, because of how open the face is, he really goes boom.
Yeah, exactly. The right arm covers the left through here.
Yeah, which it's not my preference for driving for accuracy, but that week it worked good for Phil, and you can really see how the grip shows up right there, and it's like a lot of roll and flip.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can hit bombs and find them, you can play. I've drawn in a couple lines just to see how Phil does with his body motion. So I got a line on his rear end and one on his head, and you can see his head kind of backs up a little bit because he's steep, and that's kind of a telltale sign. Anybody whose shaft comes in steep, generally their head's going to back up to make space for that.
Kind of similar a little bit to Jack Nicklaus later in his career. He had a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, he did, for sure. And the footwork has got some similarities as well. How this hip kind of juts in instead of pushing the lead side more around.
Yeah.
But it works. When you have the greatest set of hands in the history of the game, you can get away with a lot of stuff.
Let's go look at the forward on.
Okay.
Now this is a pretty cool angle, Milo. We got a little close-up action.
Yeah, so you got us a little close-up here, and you can... I want to show everybody in slow motion how his face goes from pointing basically directly in front of him. So, show us here, Henry. We got the face directly pointed out in front.
Right.
And now as he goes through the golf ball, so I'm going to show here on the camera, as he goes through the ball, that face is squaring up. It hits the ball, and it stayed square for about 2 inches. And
all you need.
Within a foot, you're looking at the back of the club.
That's so funny.
So it's there, hits the ball, and then you're looking at the back faster than that, right there.
And he's another player that stays in the shot pretty good before eventually following the ball and coming out of it.
Yeah. When that's kind of required, when you've got the face coming in,
yeah,
you've got to put the brakes on something. If you actually watch his grip, the handle, it's actually not moving. If we could see where the handle is through the ball, that handle is not really moving at all.
Yeah,
it's kind of come to a stop.
Pointing right at his belt buckle, and then belt buckle, belt buckle.
Yeah, just boom.
Yep.
So that's an interesting pattern that Phil has there.
I'll tell you what, though, I watched him hit a wedge shot in slow motion maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I learned so much. And that's when I really started to focus more on this trail wrist, was watching him hit a wedge shot, because his left hand's more on top, right? Mm-hmm. And he hit this wedge shot, and it was like this, and he like really held on that angle as he turned through.
He pressures the shaft like this. With his wedges, he has a very stable release.
Yeah.
He's the best wedge player maybe there is. He just can't. He hasn't figured out how to make speed with that pattern.
Yeah.
Which is why he uses the other one, and when he's on, he's pretty darn good, but when he's off, he's off.
But that's one thing you could definitely learn from him, is sort of how great he is at manipulating just his hands, right? Yeah. Having some good hand action.
He's got amazing hands.
But knowing that you can strike something this way, and also knowing that you can hit something higher that way.
Yeah.
All right, Milo, now we're going to go on to Jon Rahm, U.S. Open champion, Torrey Pines, another ASU grad. So here we go. Phil Mickelson to Jon Rahm. Seems like a nice little handoff there, huh?
Yeah, back-to-back Arizona State alums doing it. Now, Jon Rahm, I'm going to draw the same lines in on Jon. So a little backside line.
Now this is probably the closest angle we've had to more ideal down the line.
It's getting really close to being a nice down the line angle. And the camera's a little movie,
a little shaky out. One of the fans.
You can see as Jon takes it back, his head actually moves out toward the ball a little bit.
Yeah.
His rear end stays back on the wall, and his wrists work interestingly.
Yeah, look at that lead wrist. How the glove really bowed at the top. Short backswing,
but really driven hard by the body. So you can see as his hands are still going up, his pelvis and his torso beginning to unwind catches his arms like that. So he's catching his arms and it creates a snap, a real slingshot action into the ball.
So his action is really more, the focus of it's really the through part, would you say, where basically his downswing is taking up more of the focus than the backswing in a way.
Yeah, his backswing's pretty short. There's not a lot of it.
Right.
So he's done by the time his hands get barely above his shoulder high. And he's changing directions hard. And one thing to remember about Jon Rahm, because I get asked this, how does he hit it so far out of that short swing? Well, how big is Jon Rahm?
He's like, what, 6'4" or something like that?
Yeah, he's 6'3" or 6'4",
like
and
Hideki,
probably like 230 or 40.
Big legs, big guy. But he's also still got a lot of rotational power, right?
Yeah, and he uses the sequence, so his hands are working up and away. His body starts to unwind hard and creates stretch shorten cycle that really unloads that club with a lot of speed. Mm-hmm. And he delivers a lot of lean in the shaft. He's also a very good ball striker.
Yep.
He's
primarily plays a little bit of a fade.
Yeah, and most would consider him like the most consistent ball striker.
Well, he was #1 on tour, I think, this last year. So.
And you can see his pivot is one that I really love. So Hideki was more of a jumper.
Yep.
Where if I put the same line on Rahm's belt, you can see he is level. He doesn't jump at all. He just pivots.
What's interesting with him, though, is that you'll see on the forward on when we go to that, He has a little bit of that rollover too, though. He's not exactly what we would say from extension to flexion of the wrist. He's got a little bit of this.
Well, you can really see it in the follow through right here. You can see his left hand is actually kind of on the back.
And his hands go from back in here shallow, and then they kind of go up a little bit into the finish.
Which doesn't matter a lot because he's perfectly planed out for like that. Right there, they're perfect. Now, what we don't know is what are some of Jon's restrictions? Why might that happen? Well, Jon's got a few different things that are off. He's got a bad ankle, so he doesn't have enough mobility. His pivot probably stops, so his arms go boom, with all that energy. They go up, instead of continuing around. That would be my guess as to why that happens. But cool move. Let's look at it from face on now. So.
Well, he also talks about how his wrists don't go into extension a lot. So I wonder, like, you see a lot of these guys, they swing and their wrist kind of rehinges, recups.
And his goes this way.
His probably stays bowed and goes up.
Well, plus his grip. We're going to look at that now.
Yeah, that's part of it.
This is more like somewhat down the target line here.
Yeah, I threw you a curveball.
You did. So I don't get a look at Jon's grip.
Well, we can look at the glove, though, a little bit here.
A little. But I can tell you, from watching Jon in person a few times, his grip looks like, it's maybe even a little more turned this way.
And you're saying, and I think you've told me before, his right hand it's not super weak. It's
his right hand is neutral to strong, actually.
Yeah.
So it's more side on, maybe even slightly under.
Yeah.
But his left hand is super weak. It's like weaker than that.
I don't know if I can go that weak.
Like that. Now you got close to Jon. But you can see how if this hinges, it would bow that.
Yeah.
And that's why his does that.
And like we've talked about before, his impact's gonna look more like that, whereas a guy like Fleetwood or you is gonna be more like that.
Exactly. Well, let's look at this. This is a cool angle you got here. So this is kind of like a 45-degree angle out in front.
Oh, we got a car ad.
Oh, thanks for the advertisement. But here you can really see that sequence. Hands going up, belt going around. Excuse me. That's a cool motion there. That hands going up, belt going around. You can really see the right bend right there.
Yeah.
And you can see how, for a guy who doesn't have a lot of ability to extend his trail wrist, it's pretty extended. So under torque, it can. When there's a lot of,
right,
because he torques it hard when he changes directions. The weight of that golf club.
You put your hands together and you're like, okay, I can extend my right and match with my left, or I can bow my left and match with my right. I mean, either way, that trail wrist is getting extended.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, we focus on the trail wrist a lot because that's most people's dominant hands. So they can feel that a little bit better.
We're righties.
So this is that little rollover move I talked about where, you look at a guy like Morikawa, he might have a little bit more face things square to the arc, whereas Rahm's is a little more in line with Phil's.
Yep. But it's a little different than Phil's because it's so much more stable through
the hitting area.
It hasn't started to roll over, and it doesn't roll over at all until watch what makes it roll over. See his right elbow? When his right elbow hits the full extension, now watch it go.
Now that's partly you said too, because his rotation at this point is starting to stall.
He rotated so far so early that now he's done. He hit a wall, and now you'll see that roll over and ride up. And you can see as he goes through it, kind of like Matt Wolf's release actually. A lot of that with the left hand and the right hand.
And he's definitely staying in the shot again.
For sure. So his head stays down for a long time. But it doesn't stay forever. Definitely goes through and then
Hogan
falls.
had a little bit of that too, right? Because his weak grip, and he talked about the left elbow pointing down to the ground, sort of.
Yeah, but at contact, Hogan's elbow pointed at the target.
Right, but I'm talking about in the release point.
He had some supination through.
Right, it's a little similar to that. Both weak-handed grips.
But Hogan's release went left lower.
Yeah.
This one goes more up. But
I doubt Rahm's clubs were 6 degrees flat.
No, it wouldn't work with a guy who's 6'4". And so yeah, it's a cool move. Love it.
All right, Milo. The last major of the year was the Open Championship. Collin Morikawa, probably one of the, I would say, best swings on tour, most stable-faced one of them.
Which creates very good iron shots. I've talked to the guys over at TaylorMade, and they say it's freakish watching him hit irons. It's like he's a laser beam. It just over and over again. Now, one interesting thing while we were off camera, we were both commenting on we had 4 guys win majors this year who all have slightly weak grips.
Yeah.
Or, in the case of Rahm and Morikawa, extremely weak left hands.
Yeah.
But none of their right hands are weak, really. Well, let's take a look at this action here. So as he hinges, you can see that it pretty much immediately starts to bow that left wrist. By the time he gets to the top of his swing, it's a little bowed, and then in transition, when his pelvis starts to unwind, you can see that pelvis unwinding. It puts a lot of hinge on that right wrist, which flexes the left one even more.
Yeah.
So he's weak
grip.
Boom, and then the weight of that golf club counteracting it hinges that and flexes that, which is an interesting motion. And then he has a lot of side bend. I think that will change over the course of his career. He's not going to be able to stay Gumby forever. But he's got more side bend than most. His pelvis is basically pointing at the target. Like, look at that. It's amazing. He's like, his belt line's got to be 70 degrees open.
Well, and as you've told me before, it's pretty good for face stability too.
Oh, it is. And you watch, if we could see the face here, which it's hard to see, but you can really see that the grip end is exiting before the club head end.
And when you watch his swing too, and that club face come through, his face, it's more square to the arc or even a little skyward than Rahm or Phil.
Yeah, Rahm and Phil have a lot more throw after they hit it, where he's much more stable this way, and his release pattern is more this direction.
You're going to see that in the forward on.
Not this direction.
Yeah.
Which, you know.
Can we go back to the takeaway real quick? You know, one
Sure.
thing a lot of people get, I think they overanalyze it a little bit and try to work on it too much, is sort of getting this club out in front of them, right? They're trying to get the club to work out in front of them a lot, so then they can sort of loop it back, shallow it. But my thing is, like, you watch his hands, they're not going out. They're staying in and the club stays out.
His hands are going in. He's kind of putting a little natural pressure down on the grip, which levers the club up. Like most of them, I guarantee you if we had his 3D motion capture, you'd see that it's mostly driven by the torso rotation. So when his chest starts to rotate, that makes the club work like that.
Right.
And he's just turning on a nice plane.
Well, there's a lot of guys, too, that played really good golf with that club not working as far out as that.
Yeah. Well, there's been guys who worked it in and played pretty darn good. Sam Snead was pretty good. Ben Hogan worked it more in.
He was okay.
They were okay. Yeah, just decent. Cool.
All right, let's go look at the forward on.
Face on. Oh, you gave me another interesting angle.
I'm challenging you, Milo.
Oh, I love all these angles. These different angles are cool, though.
This is one of my favorite angles, honestly.
I love to see this because you can actually really see. I'm going to draw some lines through here.
So this is kind of like 45 between the ball and the target.
You can really see that his spine is curved left. So there's a left bend, and it's happening, and I'm going to draw in shoulder plane and belt line. So you can see the belt is on that plane, shoulders are on a much steeper plane, which I love to see because that's a little bit of bend in that spine. Now let's delete those and watch how this change of directions works.
Look at that action, huh?
Another awesome one where you can see that left side of the pelvis starts going.
I think his is way more dramatic than Hideki's, though.
Even more.
Earlier.
Well, that's why he's more Gumby. So when he changes directions, yeah, he can stretch that. I can't do that. You can do it more than I can. When I do that, my chest goes.
But believe it or not, he works out a lot, too.
Yeah.
All these guys, you know, I know he's kind of a...
Yeah, but he's like 145, 150
He's not as big as Rahm and Hideki, but he works out a lot, too.
He definitely does. But that's a cool transition move. Hands still going up, that pelvis going back and around, catches everything, and starts it all going the other way.
So it's a little bit of a fall, too, a fall into that lead side.
For sure.
You can see his foot even kind of just a little bit of a heel lift and raise there.
Yeah, his heel lifts actually as he's falling left.
That's interesting.
That's
like tap dancing.
Yeah. So it's almost like he unweights his front foot.
But look at this yardage book in his back left pocket. Look how far it moves before the club has even come down to like P5, before his left arm comes to parallel. That yardage book's gone out of the screen.
Oh yeah, that thing goes around. He's a good mover, and he's wiry, so he's very flexible. So by the time he gets down into the hitting area, you can see his belt is pointing darn near at the target.
Yeah. Look at his left foot starting to roll over onto the outside arch
Yeah,
of
he
his
hasn't
foot.
even hit this ball yet. He's still a foot away from hitting it, and he's already on the outside edge of his foot, up onto the ball of his, or even the toe of his right foot, and his chest. You can see how open his chest is. His chest is around the corner. So that's a pretty cool move.
I would say his head is coming out of the shot a little bit sooner than some of the other guys.
Yeah, it goes with the golf club. As the club goes through the ball, the head goes with it.
Yeah.
So we might actually be able to ask him, which eye is your dominant eye? Because most guys, and it kind of lines up. You see the guys who really keep their head in it,
Yeah.
a lot of times they're left eye dominant.
Well, I would say the guys that tend to keep their head in it too tend to have maybe a little more face roll through release, whereas the guys that are opening up, the face might stay a little more stable appearing, right?
Yeah,
So,
it doesn't really matter that once you're beyond a foot past the ball,
Yeah.
whatever happens, happens, who cares?
yeah.
But it definitely, if you stay here, it stalls out your chest a little bit and makes this roll over a little bit more. So the guys that tend to let their head go can maintain this a lot longer.
Yeah.
Cool. Is that all our major champions
That's all
this year?
of them. I gave you some interesting angles, and
Well, I think between Morikawa and Rahm, we've got two guys who are going to be up there for years and years.
Yeah.
So, and there's a few others I see coming up who are also just like that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment below with any questions, thoughts, or future video ideas, as we read every comment and we try to respond to each of you. If you would like further help with your game, head over to milolionsgolf.com, my website, and you can schedule lessons with myself or a member of my team. You can also join our academy, where you can get one-on-one coaching. We have members of our academy all over the world, and we're excited to work with you no matter where you're at. And if you're new to our channel, don't forget to click that subscribe button, because we come out with new videos weekly. Thanks for watching.